Ryan Carson is a gym teacher who spends most of the time thinking about his past relationship with Phoebe. Ryan has a daughter named Maggie, an assistant district attorney in Chicago. Maggie visits his dad in Winslow upon receiving a call and messages from him a day ago, saying they needed to talk. She arrives at her dad's house late at night, ringing the doorbell and knocking. Not getting any response, she then calls his phone, which is ringing and lying beside him on the floor, with a man's figure standing by him. Maggie opens the door with her keys to see her dad lying on the floor with Phoebe's picture next to him. At once, Maggie makes an emergency call for an ambulance. The figure silently walks out of the house without any traces. The next day, Cassandra is walking up to her niece, Billy Blessing's house. Cassandra gets frightened immediately as Billy opens the door. Cassandra always complains she doesn't like people popping out of doors on her. You only do that if you want her in her grave. Billy is baking muffins for her TV show today. Pam Messner is going to be there. She's running for mayor and wants to bake healthy muffins because people like her for her healthy lifestyle. Cassandra mentions Billy's past relationship. Billy broke up with him a year ago, but they still get in touch with him. Cassandra thinks Billy still likes him, which is why she is finding it difficult for her to get into another relationship. Billy cuts her words off and offers her a muffin to taste in return for a review. Cassandra tastes it and gives it a perfect. At the studio, Billy is setting up her spot for her cooking show. Philip tries one muffin and loves it at once. Billy feels the muffins still need a little touch, even after receiving good remarks about it. Lance, Billy's co-worker, walks in, whining about how hard it is sharing his dressing room with Carlos Montan, the new reporter from New York. Philip tries to calm Lance down with a muffin, but he says he has problems with his larynx and excuses himself. Billy and Philip begin to talk about Carlos and how he thinks he's the ladies' man. Lucy intrudes, adding that Carlos is very good at his job and is ever ready to break rules to unearth any little truth to make his shows successful. Carlos joins them and picks up a muffin for himself without even asking for it. He then asks who made them, and Philip gladly tells him Billy did. Carlos goes on to ask who Billy is. Philip again tells him Billy is the highest rated host on the show. Carlos then apologizes for his behavior and leaves. Lucy can't stop but stare at Carlos admirably as he leaves. The show begins. Billy and Lance give out the headlines for the show and introduce Carlos. As planned, Billy is going to teach Pam how to bake healthy muffins after the break. Carlos interferes with his own perception that Pam needs to be interviewed rather. Carlos's words cause an argument right at the break. Carlos explains his point more to Pam and Brad, her campaign manager, that the people need a leader, not a baker. Billy agrees with Carlos, leaving them speechless. Brad reminds Pam that they need to stick to their plan and not take Billy and Carlos's advice. Pam at last agrees to do the interview, leaving them all agape, with the exception of Carlos, the mastermind behind it. The interview goes on successfully. Philip tells Billy that Brad is impressed with the interview and wants more of it. He again tells her about the look Carlos gave her throughout the interview. Philip thinks Carlos uses that same look on Lucy too. Billy tells him it's Lucy rather who has a crush on him. Carlos comes in congratulating Billy for how good she was at interviewing Pam, and questions why she's baking instead. Carlos continuously praises and tries to flirt a little with her. Carlos opts to buy her lunch, but before she could give an answer, she receives a message from Maggie Carson, a friend she grew up with. Billy tells Carlos she has to leave because Maggie's dad, Ryan, is in the intensive care unit. Carlos gives Billy that look again, the look Philip was talking about. Minutes later, Billy is at the hospital. Maggie explains to Billy how his dad ended up there, putting the blame on herself for not checking her phone to see the messages Ryan left. She was in court the whole day and didn't have time for her phone. Billy drives her home to shower and change clothes. Maggie picks up the phone and Phoebe's picture from where her dad was lying last night and puts them back in place. Billy picks up Phoebe's pictures and stares at it for a while. It's been 7 years since Phoebe left, but Ryan still keeps her belongings. Billy is wondering why Ryan brought out the box containing Phoebe's photos, jewelry and letters she left before leaving, but Maggie claims he does that all the time. Maggie leaves Billy's to go and pack some of her father's things. Billy throws her eyes around and finds particles of black substances on the floor. She follows it down to the basement, only to find a skull half buried in the soil. Maggie is at once traumatized, knowing that the police might issue an arrest after their investigation, despite the fact that she strongly believes her dad is innocent. Detective Wally, Billy's friend, shows up, giving Billy a warm hug. Wally introduces Tyrell Rice, the new head of homicide. Tyrell is an all-round serious person who doesn't even have time for a little entertainment. Maggie takes them inside. Tyrell really did his homework well. He already knows Ryan is in the hospital and how Maggie does well on her cases. Wally and Tyrell start their investigation. They find a watch buried in the soil. The watch doesn't look that old as compared to the skull. Tyrell questions Maggie about it. Maggie denies knowing who the watch belongs to. Tyrell notices the same watch on Phoebe's hand in the photo and asks who she is. Maggie tells the truth this time around. Maggie leaves the house with her suitcase, jumping straight into Billy's car. Wally gives Billy assurance that Tyrell won't jump into conclusions. Maggie recalls the day her dad called her saying he's in trouble concerning Phoebe and might need a lawyer. Maggie quickly deletes the messages he sent to clear evidence which might get Ryan into jail for killing Phoebe. Billy takes Maggie to her house to stay for some time. Billy asks Maggie if something happened that night before Phoebe left that note. Maggie revealed Phoebe was having an affair with Jay Mesner, Pam's husband at the time. Cassandra makes it to Billy's house, rambling that she needs more explanation on what's happening. Cassandra goes on, saying she knew Ryan and Phoebe's relationship would end because Phoebe always saw him as father and nothing more. Billy cuts in, asking her if she was there that night when everything happened. Cassandra says he should leave it for the police and inspectors to do their job. She also advises her to tell Tyrell whatever she knows, since Maggie isn't willing to say a thing. Cassandra's mood changes in a flash as she sets eyes on Maggie. I just can't get enough of Aunt Cassandra's character. Billy goes to Ryan's house with lunch for Wally and Tyrell. Tyrell is happy about it. He sits with Billy to have a small talk with her. The two seem to get along well. Tyrell thinks Billy came to get information for her news story, but she proves him wrong and tells him all she knows, including the lie Maggie told, just as Cassandra advised. After the conversation with Billy, Tyrell and Wally go to Pam's office to gather information about Jay. Brad makes an effort to prevent them from seeing Pam. Tyrell shows him his badge, leaving Brad with no alternative than to take them to her office. Tyrell briefs Pam they're there to ask about Jay's whereabouts. Pam starts having flashbacks of the night she found out Jay was having an affair with Phoebe. Brad intrudes, asking why they are after Jay. Tyrell tells them about the skull they found in Ryan's basement. Per their investigations, they think it's Phoebe's remains. Brad firmly states that they will never find Jay, even if he knew something about Phoebe's death. Pam goes on to mention the money Jay stole from her family's business. To conclude the investigation, Tyrell asks why Ryan called her yesterday, and again Brad comes in saying he answered the call and that Ryan called to contribute to their campaign. While Wally and Tyrell are on their way out, they spot Carlos going into Pam's office and wondering what he's doing there. Carlos budges into Billy in the dressing room, admiring her for the shows she makes. He then states the main reason why he's there. He wants Billy to join him and make a story on Ryan's case. He further explains to her that Maggie killed her stepmom, and her father covered it all up for her. Again, he thinks Jay killed her and run away with all the money he stole from Pam. Billy and her aunt carry out their own investigation. They go to Gwendolyn's house. She was present that night too. Gwendolyn welcomes them and starts talking about Phoebe's body in Ryan's basement. Before they could even say why they came, Gwendolyn mentions that a detective came by yesterday, probably Tyrell. He came to fetch information on the case. Gwendolyn starts to recall that night. Just when Billy asks her if she knows where Jay is, Gwendolyn voices that she wishes Jay has disappeared permanently and won't ever return. Billy and Cassandra, upon hearing those words, stare at their faces and sip their coffee. On their way out, they meet Mike, Gwendolyn's husband. He starts bragging about the projects he has put up in the town so far. They set off to go, and just then Gwendolyn sends Cassandra a friend request. It amazes her because she called her a show-off for giving them a tour of her house. Back at home, Billy does research on Gwendolyn and discovers a Canadian real estate agency is following her, the same country where Jay's car was found. She gives them a call, but they have no information about him, so she leaves her contact just in case someone knows him. At the studio, Carlos announces to Billy he got Tyrell to come on the show tomorrow to discuss the case. The next day, the show begins with Carlos, Billy and Tyrell. Carlos calls in the first eyewitness to the case, Phoebe Carson. She isn't dead after all. She tells her version of the incident, concluding she found Jay dead by his car outside with a screwdriver in his neck. Everyone watching the show is surprised to see the supposed dead Phoebe reveal that Jay is rather the dead one. Tyrell stops Phoebe and takes her to the station for further investigations. Wally finds the screwdriver that was used to kill Jay in Ryan's garage. Ryan is awake and wants to tell the police all he saw. He called Brad the day he discovered the remains and told him everything. Maggie wants to know why Brad didn't mention that to the police. Meanwhile, Tyrell is coming with an arrest warrant to take Ryan away, because the fingerprints on the screwdriver matches his. Maggie stops him from entering Ryan's room, saying he will sue him if he tries talking to her dad. Outside the hospital, Billy is telling Tyrell that Brian told Brad about it, but he didn't say anything. He doesn't listen and thinks Billy is only trying to defend his friend's dad. Billy is alone at the studio. She finds an envelope on her desk, picks it up, and opens it to find a picture showing Ryan's angry face that night at the fireworks, with murderer written boldly on it in red ink. She goes to Ryan's house to check his phone if he truly called Brad. Carlos touches her shoulder from behind her, giving her a fright. He was following her all this while. Carlos tells her the police retrieved one fingerprint that wasn't Ryan's. Billy and Carlos hide when they see flashlights from outside. They remain there till the policemen leave. Billy goes to Pam's office the next morning to invite Brad for breakfast. At the table, she presents the picture to him, asking who took the picture of them. If the picture shows all of them, Brad starts having flashbacks of the night he was taking those pictures at the fireworks. He denies doing it in front of Billy. The food comes, he chooses to pay by check and leaves without saying goodbye. Billy meets Tyrell outside and hands him the pen Brad signed with since he's been struggling to get his fingerprint. Tyrell then apologizes for how he spoke to Billy at the hospital yesterday and takes her to the station. The fingerprint on the screwdriver doesn't match that of Brad's. Billy winds it all up, suggesting that Brad is covering up for the killer. Billy stops by Cassandra's garage to ask her to invite Gwendolyn out to lunch as a means to ask her if she saw Brad taking pictures of them that night. Instantly, Gwendolyn drives by, inviting them to a party she's holding in her house today. Billy receives a text from Maggie saying she was invited too. Billy, Maggie and Cassandra arrive at Gwendolyn's house and see Tyrell there too. Cassandra shakes Tyrell's hand, introducing herself. She whispers into Billy's ear, reminding her she told her it's going to be fun tonight. At the party, we see that everyone who was at the fireworks that night is present except Brad. They all tell their part. Gwendolyn says Brad didn't feel safe coming, so he asked her to share his part of the story. Brad saw Phoebe by Jay's side on the floor and took a picture of it. Gwendolyn brings out the picture and accuses Phoebe of Jay's death. Maggie leaves the party announcing that she needed to attend to her dad. Gwendolyn continues to accuse Phoebe. Tyrell doesn't buy that. He wants to hear those words coming out of Brad's mouth. He takes the photo and takes Phoebe back to her hotel. Billy and Carlos go to Brad's house and find him dead. The police arrive and detain them till they are proven not guilty of Brad's death. The next morning, Billy and Carlos rush into the dressing room to change for the morning show. They bake muffins with Leon on the show. Billy goes home and tells her Brad is dead, and Maggie is nowhere to be found. Minutes later, Cassandra's phone rings. She's too scared to pick it, so Billy answers it. It's Tyrell. He called to tell her Phoebe isn't in her hotel. Maggie arrives at the house with a box of police investigations on her dad's case. She went to copy those files the night she left the party. Cassandra spots a picture of her screwdriver she labeled that got missing years ago in the police files. The same screwdriver that was used to kill Jay. Maggie goes with Aunt Cassandra to her house for the toolbox. They return and find out Billy isn't in the house. Cassandra calls Tyrell to tell him Billy has gone missing too. Tyrell leaves the groundbreaking ceremony and goes in search of Billy. Billy is at Gwendolyn's house. Billy thinks she killed Jay and stole the money he was running away with, and in the act, Brad saw her and began to blackmail her. The reason why she killed him too. Gwendolyn confidently tells Billy she can never prove what she's thinking. Billy then hands her a photo that Brad took. The lady in the photograph had the same watch in another picture she took with Cassandra. Gwendolyn points a knife at her, knowing that Billy has found out the truth. Tyrell comes right that moment and arrests her for the murder of Jay and Bard. Her fingerprint matched the one on the screwdriver. Tyrell calls Carlos and tells him Phoebe is inside the warehouse. He rushes in and stops the event. Tyrell arrives with Gwendolyn and arrests Mike too. Wally and Tyrell search the warehouse and find Phoebe tied up. At the end of the movie, they hold a small gathering to celebrate the success of the case.